Okay. Those online, can you hear me okay? All right. Okay, I'll call the finance meeting of July 7th to order. It is 5:31. We have a quorum with all 5 members present, either online or in present or inside the building. Well, number 2, review and approve minutes from the finance committee minutes from June 23rd, 2025.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, motion by Berg.
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Lampy. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Number 3, business, review and take action, solid waste foreman, promotion of existing employee. Come up, Stacy. You're okay. You're speaking so that those online can hear you.
Okay, so I did try to give a pretty detailed attachment. I don't know if you want me to go through it. Do you have questions? Let's start there if you have questions.
I would say summarize what you can and just give us an overview of the things you want us to know.
So the foreman position's been open since April. We are asking to promote a 25-year employee of that solid waste division into that position. He did apply the first time this was a position was open, before the previous person had it. That was my decision of trying to mix things up and go on the outside, and it did not work out for us. So I'm going to go with what works. And Wayne stepped up and has been helping since the position's been open. The whole crew goes to him already for guidance on the routes. So I think he would be a very easy transition for him and well-deserved.
And you're showing that because of his time in as an employee that.
Correct. Right. So the way that our handbook reads with the step and needing to get 5% increase, he does fall above what we can just approve. We have to bring it to the finance committee because it's a step 6, I believe.
It was posted for a while for the other employees as well, too.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it was a full 7 days.
So everyone had a chance to apply that was inside.
Yeah. Well, I would go with your recommendation. I like to see a mix of people with different backgrounds and I have no problem with going outside to get the best employee, but if there's been some effort made and you're resorting to this approach to fill the vacancy that's needed, then I would go with that recommendation.
If that was a motion, I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Berg, second by Davis. Okay, any more discussion on it?
This is to put Wayne Boyd at H step 6 effective July 9th, right?
Correct. So that's the first day of the next pay period.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Steven spending money or rolled?
Voice vote's fine.
Okay. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Item B, review and discuss use of TID number 4 increment. I think I'll read. Okay. I'll read that now, Stephen. Yeah, okay. Alderman Arnett had want a little mention here, had some questions about it, so I'll read that out loud for everybody. On TID 4 increment, first, I'd like to clarify an essential point about the process for allocating the increment from the closure of TID 4. The final allocation of those funds requires approval by the full council. The Finance Committee plays an essential role in making a recommendation to council on the allocation of those funds. The council has the final approval. I appreciate the Finance Committee on March 24th of 2025 made a recommendation on 4 requests for allocation of those funds. However, that recommendation was never acted on by council. As noted in the minutes, the Finance Director was going to prepare a formal request for budget modifications. This has not happened. We now have a new council and a new Finance Committee, which are not bound by a prior recommendation that was never acted on by council. Therefore, it is within the purview of council and the Finance Committee to look at the allocation of the full $908,506 remaining after the contractual obligation of the Rock River Ridge infrastructure is satisfied. Furthermore, council and the Finance Committee are not limited to the list presented on March 24th. That list and any other items can be considered. For example, council and the Finance Committee could look at any of those items on the capital improvement list, or such ideas as prepaying debt or allocating the funds to our fund balance are within scope of this discussion. I strongly encourage the Finance Committee to not be limited to that March 24th list. One project I'd like to see considered is the shared use path running along South Church Street from Quick Trip to Air Park Drive. At the time of the previous discussion, the project was not on the board. However, after years of applying for a state TAP grant for this project, we were finally awarded the grant this spring. The city's portion of the cost is $228,000 for design and 20% of the construction cost. Our share estimated at $300,000. The need for this shared use path is a direct result of the economic activity created by TID 4. There is no other project or proposed use of these TID 4 increment funds with as direct a connection to TID 4 than this project. If not for TID 4, we would not be pursuing this project. Therefore, it's entirely appropriate that TID 4 increment funds be applied to this project. I would like to see at least the design cost of $220,000 paid from the TID 4 increment funds. It is certainly a more appropriate and higher priority use than spending $125,000 on temporary traffic barriers, for example. As the rest of the list, I strongly encourage the Finance Committee to open the view to higher priority projects not listed on the extreme limited list presented on March 24th.
Mr. Mayor, that statement you just read from Alderperson Arnett, is that actually, that's not, where'd you get those comments? Are they just a written statement that he?
They're an email he sent
An email?
previously, yes.
Just want to make sure everybody had it. Mr. Lampy?
We get a comment in terms of the, whether or not, we are able to reallocate funds differently than what we see on the chart here.
Would you turn your microphone on, please, Mr. Lampy?
Oh, that's unusual. I'm sorry. I had asked if we could get a clarification about whether or not, as a finance committee, we do have the ability to revisit what the finance committee did recently.
As the finance committee, you would always be able to amend a budget or modify the funds as long as those funds haven't already been relied upon and those actions taken. So to the extent that you guys decide to modify those or make a recommendation to modify them, that could occur, but ultimately it's up to the common council as to what budgets are modified or how funds are utilized.
So that actually is the clarification I'm looking for. Out of the green, the purple items that are on this list, have we done anything to essentially commit ourselves to the uses of those funds since that decision was made by finance?
Yes, with one item, the portable traffic barriers.
How committed are we on that?
They have 50% of the money and they are due to arrive in 2 weeks.
Okay, in which case we pay the other 50%.
The staff had some training on those, so I did put some images in front of you of what they look like.
Mhm.
And I think there was 5 items in there that were marked green and approved by the Finance Committee in March.
Yep.
Leaving 265,000 plus available. There were some items that were suggested. So, Ms. Davis, go ahead.
Am I correct in the process that would need to take place, that although the finance committee may have voted as a committee to allocate these funds, there's still additional processes such as budget amendment that would need to be approved by council, and then also the purchasing of anything over $50,000 would need to be approved by council. Is that correct?
Yes. There were two reasons for the delay. One, if you recall, or finance committee members at the time would recall, Wilbur Street expansion was in the hands of Dodge County for the potential recipient award of a grant. And so there was not a desire on the part of the finance committee at that time to necessarily show its hand on whether or not that $100,000 was going to be an award through our money. And then in addition to that, as I sought the input of our audit team on the what needed to be done for a moving of this money out of TID 4, because I've not been here since we've closed a TID, it was recommended to them, from them, that we actually not do any spending of money for the most part of our allocation, even though we felt comfortable what our allocation would be until the audit, and the audit is not scheduled until the month of August. So that is the reason for no request going to council to make any changes on the budget, because the auditors were suggesting that we were premature.
Can I ask a follow-up on Wilbur Street? The sheet that we're presented here has two apparently identical entries for Wilbur Street. Are those two separate asks, or is that a duplicate?
It was two separate asks. The total that was needed was 200,000. And if you recall, it was this as a source and the grant as a source and Fund 5 infrastructure as a source.
Mhm. So did the grant come through?
Yes.
Okay, so we have that essentially fully funded if we keep the green 100. I'm gonna keep asking questions if you guys don't have anything else.
Okay, Jonathan.
The Mary Clark Street Utilities Extension, was this to support some additional development in that area?
Yes. The Loeb project that we just sold the parcel, or in the process of selling the parcel.
Mm-hmm. I know a little bit about the grant program. I was on the RDA when we had discussed that. We were essentially hoping to help some of the signage in town where, you know, people have banners and whatnot still up on their buildings. They haven't committed to a permanent sign. So that was thought to be a boon for our commercial district, since we have existing tenants in those areas, just trying to keep them in place longer by putting up the necessary signs you would think they'd need to prosper in the long term.
So is that the bike lane that's being put in there to connect to Walmart? Is that maybe something we want to put as a possibility? Just add that to the list of purple or white?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with adding it to the list. I'm trying to understand Alderperson Arnett's view on this. The TID 4 area over on West Street, that defined area of industrial that is retiring or did retire. I don't know if I quite understand the direct correlation between that TID 4 project and that development, and how that directly ties into the apparent justification for this section of pedestrian walk that they want. Where's the correlation?
Well, I think he's saying all the businesses that was created from TID 4 with the Walmart area now has a lot of traffic coming through. And now we have the potential project that's going to have a walkway for bikes and pedestrians to not have to go on the road.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of the extension. I'm just trying to figure out the correlation. The businesses that are on West Street are all bona fide and real, and Clausen obviously is by far the major improvement that occurred because of TID 4. But I'm I'm just trying to I appreciate his rationale and his passion for wanting to address it that way, but I'm just trying to understand better the correlation. All right.
I think Alderman Smith is trying to get some attention.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
I had exactly the same questions that Alderman Berg is inquiring about. I'm completely in favor of this project, the walkway from the Quick Trip down to Air Park Drive. But the nexus that is being referred to in Alderman Arnett's communication, I think is just based on the mistake that is misassigning the TID number 4 to the Walmart area TID, which was TID 3 and was retired some time ago, which obviously was a very profitable TID. And the development that occurred in TID 3 is certainly a great justification for this walkway, which will be a tremendous asset to the city. But I don't see the connection between this walkway and TID 4.
May I
Mr.
speak?
Davis. Yep.
Yeah. So for these particular funds, I believe, if I'm understanding correctly, they can be allocated anywhere in the city because we're closing out TID 4, right? And we have these remaining funds. I hear a lot of people on the committee interested in helping with that bike path. And I actually think that one thing that we could do that would help us when we get to our one of the next items, the capital improvement projects, is to possibly reallocate, for instance, maybe the Washington Park Diamond renovations. That was $148,000, and take that off of remove the pink, and instead add the bike path and make it green. Now, I think this item on our agenda is just a review and discuss, no action taken as I'm reading it. But that would be my recommendation, that if we can use these funds here to help with the bike path, it's actually going to help our job later when we get to capital improvements, because we're freeing up a considerable amount of money.
Right. So you believe adding the bike path and coloring it green
Yep.
and making Washington Park back to being white?
That's what I would recommend in our discussion. I don't know that we're making motions, or if that's, I would make it that motion, but I don't know if we have that authority with this itemized agenda item.
Yeah, it says review and discuss, so sorry, no
No,
changes
there
yet.
wouldn't be a ability to make a motion with the review and discuss
No.
action item.
As long as we know the thoughts of the finance committee, that'd be fine, but
Yeah.
we can
Okay.
then bring it at the next meeting then.
That would be my recommendation, because if we put the amount that's allocated in capital improvements for the bike path and we use these funds, then that helps us out. So that would, when we get to the point where for making a motion, that's what I would do, maybe at a next meeting.
Okay. Mr. Smith, Mr. Lampy, Mr. Berg, how are you feeling?
When we
I
looked at
agree
this-
with
You go ahead, Mr. Smith. Yep.
I agree with Alderperson Davis. I think that's exactly the way we should go. I don't think that there's any difficulty in using TID 4 funds for this geographic area. I was just trying to make the point that all of the development in the TID 4 is somewhat distant, and the Walmart TID was TID 3. I think that using these funds for this capital project will give us flexibility down the road. And I think this is an immediate and quantified need that is perfect for the use of the TID 4 funds.
Okay. Ms. Davis?
In many ways, I see what we're doing here, and please correct me if anyone on the committee sees differently. I see the process we're going through here similar to what we went through with the ARPA funds, where we kind of had a plan or idea of how we would want to spend them, but it wasn't until those items came up through the process of finance approval, council approval, budget amendments that they actually got finalized and approved. So I think keeping this before us, where we're continually thinking about it, and making adjustments is the way to go. And then, as you just said, we now know that there's a pressing need for that bike path. Let's get it on there, green light it, and take action on that. And as these other things need action, then they should be brought through those processes.
Okay. Well, I think we can leave it set then for our next meeting and just, we'll make those changes and then approve.
The one thing I had asked for when we looked at this on the last finance committee was potentially breaking up that large Main Street reconstruction on eligible expenses. There's like a 900K item out there that was still unclear what's in there.
So I believe we did get a packet that had those items.
I thought so too. So I've got a request out there just to get that offline.
Yep. It was, signage and different things like that, lamps, maybe lamp posts.
I sent that to you this morning.
Okay, I'll look for that. Thank you.
Okay. Don't have to eliminate anything, just leave it for now. Okay. Any more discussion on that as we move on to the next item? We'll just plan on making those changes and bring out the formal motion at the next meeting in 2 weeks.
There it is.
Okay. All good, Mr. Lampy?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. For time wise, I'm gonna make a motion to we got done with item B to move item, is it E?
E.
Mark, yeah, move item E up. We have some online, so I'll make a motion to move item E to go next. If got a second by Lampy. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll then go with E. Review and discuss 2026 budget global payroll assumptions. And we do have a guest. Melina, you are up.
Good evening. My name is Melina Halverson Mays. I'm a senior consultant with McGrath Human Resources Group, and I am the primary project individual that worked with the city, the previous mayor, and all of the department directors to get your salary structure for 2026 updated. And I was asked to be available this evening because I understand that city is talking about implementation strategies and options simply because the recommendation comes with a pretty significant price tag, and that you are discussing what the availability is for the city going into the next budget year. So I'm making myself available to answer questions. I don't know if you want me to just start talking about this, Mayor, or if there is some, maybe are there some specific questions that you would like me to try to address?
Well, I think some of the alders don't have much background on it, so if you want me to give a quick background on it first.
I am absolutely happy to do that. I met with the organization with the probably the previous finance committee last spring, right before your previous mayor she left office, and this was right prior to Mayor Stocks taking office. And so I spent several months working with your department directors. And what we did when we do a compensation study, we meet with all of the departments to understand what their operations, programs, and services are. And then we go out to the external market to understand what your comparable organizations or entities are paying for similar type positions. And then we develop recommendations. We had an opportunity then, after we developed those recommendations, to meet with the department directors to offer some feedback And then that was what we presented to the Finance Committee right before the previous mayor left. When we did that, we established your compensation structure, the new structure that we have recommended based upon the average to the market. And so there is a final report. I don't know if you all have had an opportunity to read through it. And if you haven't yet, it's about 50 pages long. I apologize that it really is, a pretty lengthy document, but it does outline the project and what our findings and recommendations are. And table 1 of that report does go into some detail of who the comparable organizations were that we collected your salary data, and they are all communities that really are very similar size to you and in your general geographic area. Now, what we did then was we talked philosophically or strategically with your previous mayor about, how do we want to position the city in terms of alignment with that external market. And organizations can opt to be a leader of the market. I would not necessarily say that you would be the leader or not the number, the highest paid, but some organizations want to pay higher than the average. Then you have other organizations whose goal is, and very fiscally responsible, to try to meet the market and to be average, which means that when we look at that list of comparable organizations, what we're going to try to do is position you right around the middle, knowing that some of those organizations, then about half, they're going to continue to pay a little bit more than the city of Watertown, but you're going to pay better than about half. And then there are other communities that cannot get to the average. And that was the city of Watertown with the last compensation study that you did. It's my understanding that when you worked with your previous vendor, the outcomes were that put you just under the average market. And so what we did was we presented and we developed and presented those salary ranges to align you to the average market. So what you're seeing here then, it's not putting you at the top of the market. You're not going to be the highest paid. You're still going to have positions where you're going to, hear from your employees to say, well, we can go earn more dollars in other communities. And the response to that is yes, but that our goal strategically was not to place you place you at the top. But with that in mind, one of the items of feedback that we did hear from your department directors when they were talking about some of the historical elements of the city with previous studies was that there has been an implementation of those salary ranges, but there was never any type of in-range adjustments. And so employees, what would happen is you would move your salary ranges up, but then the employees don't necessarily move up with the salary ranges, and that causes what's called in-range compression, or you have a lot of employees that are clustered towards the left side or the lower area of salary ranges, and that employees can't necessarily get caught up to the market because of that. And so the city has historically not provided what we call in-range adjustments. So that was one of the items that we did in the costing that we presented to the previous Finance Committee, was not only to get your salary ranges up to the 2025 market, but also then was to provide additional in-range adjustments for your employees. And those items are what resulted in the close to $1 million price tag that was presented to the Finance Committee. And I do believe that that is the number that your finance director has been working towards trying to develop the budget. Now, when we look at that number, that close to $1 million, I will say that, a pretty significant amount of that is the in-range adjustments. And so we did run an iteration for the city administration closer to the end of our project. I can't say that we had 100% of the placements all complete at that point, but just getting the employees into the new range with the methodology instead of being, place them into the step closest to what they were earning without taking any kind of a decrease. We don't want your employees to lose any dollars, but not necessarily making those in-range adjustments. And that certainly is an option for the city. It is a much lower cost. And so that dollar amount came in just shy of, and again, I don't know that it's a final number, but it was closer to about $350,000. So the in-range adjustments really was making up the vast majority of that costing. The other thing, just to kind of throw out there to the committee, is that the recommendations that you have before you were based on 2025 data. And one of the recommendations, one of the items that we did talk about with your previous finance committee was that when you do go to implement this, we want to make sure that you are applying some sort of an economic indicator to get those ranges increased for 2026, because the rest of those comparable entities that we use to define your market, they're all going to be putting some sort of a cost of living adjustment on their salary models going into 2026. That's very common in the state of Wisconsin. And we want to make sure that you are caught up and that you're not going to start out the gate being behind in the market. So that number does exclude a 2026 cost of living indicator to the salary ranges. So I would say that if the council or if the committee is not favorable to in-range adjustments for 2026, that we still talk about, can you incorporate or implement the salary ranges to get all of the employees at least started? Can we apply something of a 2026 cost of living onto the ranges so that those ranges continue to be market competitive? And there's other options that we've got. Certainly we can talk through, all of this was based on January 1. Do we need to, do partial in January and partial a little bit later in the year? There's certainly other implementation strategies that we can talk through based upon what the wishes of the committee really are.
Mr. Lampy.
I have two sets of questions here. One, I think, is to help translate what we're looking at with the so-called option 1 versus option 2, given what we just heard in terms of how we are hanging folks on a new pay table.
What Melina just referred to as the approximately 350,000 is closer to 339 and all, but that's option 1.
Right. Okay. What was option 2?
The in-range, so making concession for those that have worked here longer to put them up in a higher step than just getting them to the next highest pay rate for what they are currently.
Okay. I think that helps clarify as we're moving forward on that. The second question was really the one that I've been challenged with a little bit here at council, since we haven't really done a complete reconfiguration of a pay table since I've been here. When we go forward with the mechanism of placing people on the new pay table, is that something that we normally do with an individual adjustment where we have a sheet full of folks and their new ranges? Is that something that we do more algorithmically by saying that we basically are looking for the next step up? Like, what do you know what sort of mechanism we would use as a finance or as a council to get people onto that new pay table?
Who is that question directed to? I apologize.
It was to the finance director, but he kind of pointed it back to you.
No, I didn't. I also wasn't sure where you were going with that. Melina, Lisa and I talked earlier today, And I was, throwing out to her, it seemed like what would make sense is that our current payroll resolution includes all of our position titles and their associated grades. And that we would need to start with that to be able to then paint the picture of these are our new grades. And at the same time, obviously, introduce the new titling of positions that you are also suggesting that we make some changes to. So to have something that lists both the old grade and position name with the new grade and position title.
Certainly, that is, and we probably even have a document, we call that the roadmap, just to show old to new, that you can then take and put it into whatever format that you might need, to align with what you're used to seeing historically on previous resolutions.
I think that helps. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Davis.
I hate to go back to this again, but in our packet, on the spreadsheet where it has the payroll and the breakdown, McGrath option 1 is 3.71%, approximately $252,000. But then we were just talking about option 1 being $339,000. So help me close the gap on that again.
Look at the bottom of that column, Dana. The
Yes.
252 is what is general fund, but then the total of general fund plus other funds equals the 339.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have questions? Oh. Lisa, do you want to say anything? No?
Mayor Stocks,
Mr. Berg, go ahead.
just to help clarify again, I know Watertown in comparison has always been, typically average or again, maybe below average on some of the areas of how we compare on our ability to pay based on per capita and household income. Where is that currently in relation to other ones within our comparables? That how are we currently comparing with other cities that are in this group that you're using for our analysis?
Sure, and you're inquiring in terms of their per capita household income. We actually, I can't answer that question. I don't have that information readily available. When we identify the comparable organizations, what we do is we talk with each of the individual departments. We did that at the onset of the project, and we talked with them about who are you losing your human capital to, where do you look to gain your human capital from, simply because communities, and I know that this is sometimes can be a sticky point, that the confines or of the city limits are not always limited when you're looking at applications, and where do you have to gain your human capital resources from. So we're looking at it more from that vantage point of where are you getting your where are you going to get your human capital from, to make sure that you are market aligned, and that we're looking at it more on your immediate regional area. We might have thrown a couple of extras in there because of some very specific roles or positions or departments. For example, you have a health department. Not necessarily every organization your size does have a health department, but we're looking at it more from that angle, simply because if you're going to provide the programs and the services, you have to be able to pay market competitive wages, because if you don't recruit and be able to retain those personnel, you're going to have continued turnover, and that's going to be an additional expense on the organization. It's just that it's going to come out of different line items, and so we're looking at it not necessarily about your per capita or what your household incomes are. We're looking at it more from a market perspective in your region. How much does it cost for a water operator, or how much does it cost for a wastewater operator, so that you don't have that significant turnover and have those additional expenses in other parts of your budget.
And, and just to follow up on that, though, I'll tell you that I was on this council for 18 years, and so I've been here a while to know
Yep.
a little bit the perspective of our city and how we address the issue. But Watertown always had very strong job retention on the part of employees, going back for as long as I've been largely a member of the council. And it was because we had an atmosphere and a culture within our city government that made employees largely want to be here, stay here a long time, and get the benefits of longevity. Now, I mean, why are they here when they could, in theory, get more money going somewhere else? They're here for a reason. And I think that's one of the things that I think, hopefully our council, our mayor, that we work on every day to create a culture that makes people feel good about where they're working. And in doing that, some people will take a job if it doesn't quite maybe compare with others on wage or benefit. But we've always been also very strong on the benefit side. When you compared Watertown, we typically had as good, if not better than other communities on the overall package of what we are offering on benefits. That was always a strong point within our city. So I'm all in favor of making adjustments to keep and retain good people, but I also feel that we, as a council, need to emphasize to the people that we hire that we want them to be here a long time. We want we value their contribution, and we want them to make their contribution to make our town better.
Thank you, Mr. Berg.
I have a
Mr.
question.
Ms. Davis, go ahead.
Okay. So this is another item on our agenda tonight that's just review and discuss, so I don't think we're necessarily taking action. As I recall from our last finance meeting, we examined these numbers and we realized that with expenditure restraint, we were going to have some difficulty in staying within expenditure restraint this year, with the payroll and with health insurance. And I think we were supposed to go back and think about it and come back with any kinds of suggestions. I do appreciate, again, the background on this pay study, and I do have a desire to make progress in helping our employees get within that average range. That's my desire. But I have to admit, I'm not seeing how we can make those ends meet this year. So I was wondering, I did not bring back any great answers or solutions. And I was wondering if anyone did come up with any kinds of suggestions as to how we can make progress with that McGrath study, but also stay within expenditure restraint.
Anybody have comments at all? I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, I saw it before. Go ahead.
Yes, I also was reflecting upon our discussions in the last finance committee meeting and the extensive numbers that we received in terms of where we anticipate the general budget to be, simply moving forward with the commitments that we already have. And the personnel costs that are associated with this study and its implementation is probably the largest single factor that will affect our general budget and the costs that are going to be part of that general budget, other than decisions that we make about the 11 requests for new employees. But it seems to me that before we can move forward with making any kind of reasoned decisions about what we can afford, I think we need to make a specific determination as to how we will approach the ERP for the budget. In other words, from my perspective, failing to participate in expenditure restraint is not an acceptable option. But I think we need to make a specific determination that we will do what is required to conform to the constraints of the expenditure restraint program. That will then give us a framework within which we can make decisions about whether or not we can afford new employees and how much of this other personnel related costs and decisions within those recommendations are going to be affordable. So I'm not prepared, although it's not for action tonight anyway, to make any decision on personnel costs, this new study, its implementation, or issues relating to the specific request for new hires until we make a categorical decision on ERP.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Lisa.
This is Lisa from Human Resources. Melina, when you and I had a short conversation, you had said it might be possible to spread this over 1, 2, possibly even 3 years while still maintaining that structure, which is some of the issues that we have in regards to compression, all the issues that we had worked toward this solving for us. If we did a year 1, year 2, I know that Mark and I had discussed shortly, like what does it look like when we bring on that new development next year or the year prior? You had mentioned that in the leadership team. Will that change our expenditure restraint capabilities? So perhaps, like Melina had said at the beginning, if we did the 350,000, perhaps then done a COLA, and then as we get toward year 2, maybe then we can work in the expenditure restraint. Is that a possibility? Is that a pathway for us to still fix some of the issues we have, knowing that we don't have to scrap the whole thing for 2026?
Is that a
Yes, I didn't
question
have-
for me?
I did not have a question there. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Melina, can we do a year 1, year 2, year 3 and
Yes,
still meet the expectations?
you absolutely can. I mean, I think what the city is going to want to do is consider what your goal is and what is affordable in the first year. How many years do we want you take to get you to that goal? And then we take a look at, all right, what will that mean for you for year 1? Can we at least get the new ranges established, even if you cannot do a cost of living, or maybe we're going to do a deferred later in the year cost of living so that you get the lift without the total year cost. We can look at in range down the road. That in range was based on it was based on a formula, and does that need to get recalculated so that you might do 50% in year 2, and maybe you're going to catch everybody else up then in year 3. It's not unheard of that organizations have to do a multi-year approach, and we just need to understand then what are I call them the guardrails. What are those guardrails, so to speak, in that first year, and getting those parameters, and then we can help map out or offer you some suggestions on how to make that happen. But yes, that it can happen.
Thank you, Melina. Anybody else have any questions? This
Dana.
was intended just to be informative.
Dana still has her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry,
I
Dana. go
I
ahead.
have a question. So what I'm hearing you saying, Melina, is that right now we've just been presented, at least in this document that we're looking at in our packet tonight, an option 1 and an option 2. And what we would need from you is maybe an option 3, an option 4, especially if you know that we're trying to stay within expenditure restraint. Is that what we're saying, that we need some more options?
I believe, and probably what I would do is redirect that back to Mark. And do we need to facilitate for the city to take a look at other options? Because I don't know what your expenditure restraint amount, I don't know how much you're talking about being able to afford in year 1. So I don't have all of that information, but if we cannot afford 339, but we can afford a different number, then I can advise the city as to what option, what that can look like. The project itself is done. We were doing a little bit of wrap up with your water wastewater division within within the utility. So certainly, we can help advise Mark on, what that might look like and give him some, here's what we would recommend that you do, conversations.
And then as a follow-up, maybe for Mr. Stevens, would there be any option of not implementing, say, option 1 until second quarter, third quarter? Say, we're going to do this, but we're not going to be able to do it till halfway through the year. Is that something that's done or an option?
Yes, that's exactly where I would go with Milena, to still incorporate as much of the solutions that she's brought to the table with the study, but to just postpone its implementation to a later time in the year 26.
Any other questions? Mr. Lampy?
This one might be for finance again, but one of the things that we have on our what ifs calculator here is under the 371 column. We have a 371 number that is larger than the 4% column, but the bottom line seems like it fits somewhere between the 1.5 and the 2% columns when we look at the range of percentage increases across the top.
Don't let that column of the row that says total wages and required benefits is really almost worthless. Okay, and the reason for that is you look at the 4%, and that's where the fire and police departments are landing. None of the other columns have those numbers because I already know it's going to be a 4% and all. So I didn't bother to put in the other variable interest rates. They don't mean anything to you and all. So that bottom line total really is false information, doesn't really help you guide any decision making on that. I will answer the question, why does one column of 3.71 look higher in its amount than 4%? One of the guiding protocols that we asked McGrath to follow is to make sure that nobody went backwards. And so some of her numbers would have a greater percent increase so that we did that very thing, that we could look at our employees to say, with the implementation of this study, nobody's going to get less pay than what they currently are getting in 25.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I noticed as I'm looking at our budget and tax calculation timeline is that direction for budgets is sent out by the leadership team on August 5th, and the finance committee reviews the initial compensation estimates and then the guidance on the pay table back on August 11th. So is that the point where we would essentially pick one as a finance committee or make changes?
I'm looking for the input of finance, hopefully before the end of the month, so that we have that capability of giving some direction to the staff for the rest of the budget. Okay, so this is 75% of our general fund. What direction do we give to them for the remaining 25%? What are the increases going to be allowed for them to stay within a constraint? It just makes a whole lot easier process for the entire rest of the budgeting if we already know what that other number needs to be. And also looking for, since this is by far the more expensive portion of the budget, what do we tell, what do I land leadership team in its leadership team meeting of August, the first week of August, to give them the direction as you're building your budget in August, you need to stay within X% of an increase. So I'm really needing to have something by the end of July from finance.
So since we're not essentially noticed for action here, what is the mechanism that we have to provide that direction around expenditure restraint or any further direction on payroll?
In the past, we've just got a guidance from y'all at this point. Okay, that none of this is an approval. It's what number do we want to play with so that we can start doing the number crunching. If there was, basically tying into Mr. Smith's comments, we got to live within expenditure restraint, then that gives to us a number to go backwards to say, okay, then I know what can we afford. Part of the direction I'm looking for is, are you feeling comfortable that we can move forward with McGrath pay study, that pay table, and all of what it brings with it? That would be a key direction that I need now, or nope, stick with an increase of X%, stay with the same pay table that we have had for the last four cycles. And the mistakes that they attempted to solve for us in the new pay table would still exist for us moving forward. I look at that as the two primary pieces, the direction that I'm needing. If it's and this would be my request, can we please go with the McGrath option and then work with Milena on when can we figure out how to implement this within the constraint that is listed on the ERP.
Ms. Davis, go ahead.
Mr. Stevens, I would say that's where I would guide you from my perspective. The guardrails are, we want to stay with under expenditure restraint. And from my perspective, I like to see what we could do to move towards the McGrath fixes that have been presented. Something Milena said, and I'll just leave this as a comment, that was meaningful to me is she was talking about, essentially she said, if you're going to offer services, amenities, then you need to make sure that you're paying the personnel an average rate or a good wage. And the reverse of that is, in this process, is it possible that we are offering services and amenities that maybe we cannot afford? And those are hard questions. And unfortunately, they may be questions that we'll need to look at this year.
Mr. Bergen.
Just to follow up on Dana's comment, then I think that if you want to actually address this proposal that we have through that McGrath and implement that in some fashion, then we're making an assumption that the number of employees within these departments are a constant and that we're accepting them as a baseline, and we're trying to implement with increases that are viewed as appropriate. If the McGrath recommendations and the intent is to move in that direction, and it has some difficulty because of our expenditure restraint program that we want to abide by and stay within, I think it is a very hard topic to look further into. But as a department head, maybe we have to look at the services and the programs and the activities that we actually are offering as a city. Maybe there are some areas of saving, in theory, by looking critically within these departments, because if there's obviously in some way a lesser number of positions or employees, and that gives you dollars you don't have now, you can allocate those to increases and to addressing more actively the recommendations of this study that we've got in front of us. So, figuring the number of people we have, I'm sure they're all good people in a way that we want to retain and keep, but it may not be, if we want to address everything that's being recommended, we can't do all of this. We're going to have to maybe somehow look within our budgets, and our mayor's going to give us an executive budget, and maybe on his end, he's going to find a few areas of savings that might give us dollars we don't have now. So that we'll have to wait and see, but I'm open to the recommendation, but I think we have already heard from everybody largely on the Finance Committee wanting to stay within expenditure restraint, and to do that, we have to make some changes in theory to make it happen.
Mr. Lampe.
So I'll offer my annual dissent from the expenditure restraint program, pretty much for the reason that Berg mentioned, which to me, that appears about the only way that we're going to avoid potentially staff cuts in 2026.
Mayor, I just want to bring to attention, Melena has another meeting she needs to get to.
Okay.
So if we
Okay.
have any additional questions for her.
Thank you, Melina.
You're very welcome. We'll talk with you again if you need anything. Good evening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, nice job. Thank you.
So they identified specific positions that were underpaid. So some are much higher, and as someone mentioned before, that no one's gonna get a pay cut on it, but some of the positions were above average in the area and some are way under. So it's trying to fix that. So nobody wants to leave. So I'm in favor of trying to implement this in any way possible as well. Does anybody else have any further Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Well, I guess with what Mark had said and the desire and what would be most helpful for moving ahead for the budget formulation, I think, and the timeline being basically the end of the month, I think what would be wise for us tonight, not in a position to actually specify action this evening, but I think that if Mark could do just a couple of things for our next meeting, we'd be in a position to make some pretty definitive decisions. And I think what I would like to see is there is, from my perspective, a clear consensus on staying within the expenditure restraint program. So with that as a given, not that we've taken action, but just using that from the discussions tonight to begin moving forward. And then under this option one approach, what the alternatives would be, given the broader budget picture that we fairly well had presented at the last meeting, what would be a time within the 2026 budget when that option one might be implementable within the expenditure restraint restrictions. Then what we do is we would be able to have those alternatives. We'd be able to consider whether or not there was any sentiment in favor of adding any of the new positions, and we'd be able to determine a bottom line number which may be in deficit as to what amounts we would have to cut to both the personnel budget and the remaining 25% to meet those expenditure restraint limits. So I think if we had that available to us next meeting, we would be able to make the kind of decisions that would give the guidance that Mark's looking for.
Okay, so I'll summarize as stay within the restraint program, and you want Mr. Stevens to look at possible different implementation dates for the pay study.
Correct.
Okay, general consensus with everybody? Okay, all right, thank you. All right, move on to item C then. Review and take action, approve amendment to ordinance 38-4 bond deposit schedule. Okay, sorry, Mr. Lamp was trying to find it on the screen here. Go ahead.
I would just move to approve and recommend the ordinance to amend section 38-4 bond deposit schedule to the common council.
Okay, motion by Lampy.
Second,
Okay, second by Davis. Any discussion on it?
Mayor Sachs, if you want, just a little background as to
Go ahead,
where
Mr.
it came.
Yeah.
The municipal court judge requested that this amendment be made to the ordinance so that he keeps the official copy of the municipal court or bond schedule. It's ultimately up to the city. There's no requirement as to where that original copy has to be maintained. My recommendation would be that it actually stays in the clerk's office. That's where the archives for the city typically are considered to be. I don't have any concern with sending a copy to the municipal court or anything like that, but if the municipal court's responsible for maintaining the official copy, there's always a possibility that that gets changed or modified beyond what the city's aware of, or it can cause some other confusions if there's different copies. So I would suggest just making it one location at most, and then just saying that additional copies are either kept at other offices, or there's nothing that prohibits the additional copies from being distributed to those locations as well. So just striking those completely and just designating one location, I think would be the best action for this type of ordinance.
Which is what we have for language in the ordinance that we're looking at?
The original ordinance requires that the copies of the bond schedule are placed with the city clerk and the police departments.
Oh, yeah.
And so this would be a modification and would have the original approved bond schedule be maintained by the municipal court, and then
Right.
copies provided to the city clerk and police
Yeah.
department.
Right.
So if it's just a copy, there's no legal requirement for it to be listed. There's nothing that prohibits them from having a copy, so I would either just strike the city clerk and police department if you guys do want the municipal court to maintain that original copy, or ultimately it's up to you guys too, if you want to honor the request from the municipal court judge or keep this in the city clerk's office.
Any preference?
Defer to the city attorney.
Okay,
Yeah, I guess I'm not seeing the harm, even if the copies are not, I don't know, you want to say how, the absolute legal copy, but basically if you have copies in the offices of the city clerk and the police department, that ensures that they're always going to be available for any citizen inquiry. And I think that's okay.
The only complication becomes if one of the copies gets modified somehow, and it can cause confusion in the future as to which one's the official copy. So that's what this ordinance does, is it designates which one's going to be the official copy, which ultimately would come back to whichever resolution was most recently passed regarding the municipal bond schedule.
Couldn't we pick this, the city clerk, and just make a copy on the police department and the court and go the other direction?
Yep. Or you can just designate the city clerk and leave it blank, and city staff can make sure that those departments have copies. My office will also have a copy at all times, but I wouldn't suggest that you add my department to that list.
where do you prefer it, Mr. Lampy?
If the intent of this is basically to pick either the city clerk's or the police department's copy as the official one, and the city clerk typically keeps records of this, I mean, my preference would be we just basically make the city clerk the official place and essentially swap city clerk and municipal court in that last sentence above section 2.
Do you need a motion, Mr. Chesbro, or no?
That would be a motion to amend the current motion,
Okay,
but
Vote
that
on
would
that
need a
first.
second.
yeah, anybody want to second that?
Restate what would happen with his amendment.
The last sentence where it's mostly read there and where when is crossed out. I'm proposing that it reads, the approved bond deposit schedule shall be kept by the city clerk and copies shall be kept in the offices of the municipal court and police department. So swap the city clerk and the municipal court in that last section, so the city clerk has the official copy, everybody else has the unofficial copies.
So I have a motion to amend. There's a second.
Second.
Second by Davis. Okay. Any further discussion on that? Okay, we'll vote on the amendment then. The original
Amending the motion.
amending the motion. Okay, Lampy,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye, Davis.
Aye.
Okay, passes 5-0. Now you go back with it being amended.
Yep.
Okay, and the original motion was brought by Lampy and second by Davis. Any further discussion on it? Okay,
We're voting on the ordinance
no,
as
vote.
amended.
as amended, now we'll vote yes. All good, Mr. Berg? Okay, Lampy,
Aye.
Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye, Davis.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. It's harder to try to keep in order. Okay. Item D, review and take action, recommend 2025 solid waste fee schedule and 2026 other fee schedule.
As part of our preliminary work for the budget on an annual basis, I ask all of the departments to provide a review of their related fees and give to us any recommended changes. And so that has been completed and is presented to you tonight. If you recall at the last meeting, though, Stacy Winkleman brought to our attention that there are some decreases that could be afforded right away in the solid waste fee schedule. So the resolution that I'm presenting to you is an approval of changing the general fee schedule with two different implementation dates. I've listed on page 13 those that would have an effective 8/1/25 date change to eliminate or reduce any of the solid waste as listed there next to that row, listing it as no charge. In consult with Stacy, I recommend that we keep the verbiage listed so that it answers people's questions. If I happen to have a small appliance and I'm wondering what's the charge to get rid of this, then I can explicitly see that there's no charge because it's still listed on the chart for there. So I'm suggesting that we keep the listing of items with then the recommendation of no charge for those things that are August 1. Everything else that is listed in the red ink would be effective a January 1, 2006 start date.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution draft that's been provided to us and approve it as proposed.
Okay, motion by Berg,
Second.
second by Smith. Okay, any further discussion? All right, Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye, Davis,
Aye.
Lampy.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, next go to item F, review and discuss initial draft of FY26 capital improvement plan. With that, I'll read another email. This too is from Alderman Arnett, but I have 3 essential facts to share with you. We have more than 120 miles of streets. The average street lasts 30 years. We have averaged less than 2 miles of street reconstruction, resurfacing per year the last 10 years. Easy math shows you will never keep up with street repairs at this rate. We will continue to fall further and further behind. And here is a 4th fact. By far the most common request from our citizens is to fix the streets, and it's easy to understand why. We need to commit more resources to our streets, and we need to manage them in a different way. Full street reconstruction projects consume vast resources to fix a relatively short distance. While necessary, we need to be equally focused on street maintenance that extends the life of streets and is far more cost effective. Resurfacing, chip sealing, and similar techniques extend the life of streets significantly and cover much greater distances at a much lower cost. The reality is we have inherited a huge deficit of streets that are now in dire need of resurfacing. Waiting to pick these off one by one with full reconstruction will take too long. We get to all these streets with full reconstruction projects. We will not get to all these streets with full reconstruction projects in the foreseeable future, next 15 to 20 years. We just don't have the funds. We should go ahead and target some of them with resurfacing projects. When I was previously on council and chair of the Public Works Committee, we managed to build up the resurfacing chip sealing budget to about $1 million annually. At that time, that meant an additional 3+ miles of streets getting fixed per year. At that rate, we would have begun to make real progress on fixing the streets. Unfortunately, that pace was not sustained. This needs to be our goal now. I would like to see at least an additional $500,000 committed for streets for 2026, specifically for resurfacing and chip sealing, if not a full $1 million. And this should be done by removing other items from the list for next year, not by adding to the budget. There are many nice to haves on the capital improvement list. Fixing our streets is a need to have and should be prioritized above nice to haves. Fixing our streets is more important than paving a parking lot or remodeling City Hall. Same just a few projects on the capital improvement list for next year. Mr. Berg?
Yeah, I like Chairman Arnett's view, and I think he's right on. I also was a chairperson for that committee, and that was always our goal. At the time, the superintendent, Rick Schultz, was very good at emphasizing a maintenance milling approach to get the best bang for our dollar with the dollars we had, to cover more streets and to make progress on the goal of addressing the streets needing repair and improvement. So I'm in favor of his objective. It's obviously easier said than done, but I'd like to work in that direction.
Okay. Ms. Davis?
Couple of thoughts and questions. As I look at the infrastructure, so this would be in our packet where we're at the capital improvements. I would say line 182, street resurfacing costs. In 2025, we have itemized numbers for street resurfacing, street crack sealing, street patching, and so on, from 182 to 186. But in 2026, there are no funds that I'm seeing itemized there. And what am I missing? So are we planning to do some street resurfacing or sealing and coating?
We are. So in 2025, those numbers are itemized based on the CIP for the approved 2025 budget. We haven't gotten that far in putting together the 2026 budget yet, but there will be resurfacing, crack sealing, seal coating, and patching proposed.
Is that why that note's in there, that we're planning each column equals 1.75? Infrastructure total?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so as I was looking over the capital improvements, I have some suggestions, and I know we're not taking action tonight, so this is something that I'll just put out there. We can continue to talk about and mull over. There was the Public Works, it's 52-41, and there was a vehicle replacement of $35,000. And I was wondering if that could be postponed a year. Recreation.
Dana, can you list the line number that you are?
Yeah, I wish I put lots of details in it.
72.
I omitted to put the line number.
72? Oh, okay.
And then the next one was recreation. And it was 55-20. I'm sorry, I don't have the line number. Maybe someone can grab that.
What's the item?
It was the vehicle. So this was for the program vehicle, I think for a van for $55,000.
Line 112.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I wondered if that could be deferred a year. And then the park, the Benson Shade Structure Upper, it's
132.
48,974.
Yep, that one, just as a reminder, when you see the numbers with a dollar sign and left justified, they
Oh,
are not included in the overall totals. And then I would have highlighted in the column of reason/need what its source is.
okay.
So
Yeah,
that one
I missed
is
that.
from sponsorships.
And then the other would be the shared bike path. That was allocated, I think it's $155,000.
Line
Again, I don't,
207 on page 75.
okay. Again, if we use TID for money there, we could either have a complete cost savings there or allocate it to another area, perhaps to streets.
I was speaking with Andrew Byer right before the meeting, and he believes that that 155 that we've funded through the current year will likely afford the total, so that 155 in 26 is in fact probably going to not be needed.
Oh,
So that will be a savings.
I see. Okay, well, that's good.
Are you trying to find like 500,000, Ms. Davis? Is that what you're looking for?
No, I just went through and these were just some items that I, I would suggest we discuss deferring for another year or so.
Okay. Anybody else have any suggestions, comments?
These are very helpful because then I go back to the department heads to be able to discuss this and then bring it to the mayor's attention as well.
Any more? We can move on to the next item. Mr. Lampy, go ahead.
So I do want to address what I think I heard in the letter, and I guess I'm challenged to find where that, so-called $1 million of seal coating existed. I'm looking back on budgets all the way to like 2016, where like seal coating is brought out separately, and I'm watching that number bounce around a little bit. It looks like it bounces around between like 140 all the way up to about 270 a year just on seal coating. And then streets, that's a number that we have that has also popped up and about 700, 13, 17. In the past couple of years, we had that riding as high as I think about $1.9 million in 2023, and then came down to 1.1. So that it's been up and down. But I'd like some additional clarity, I think, in terms of both laying out what we actually spent on street reconstruction, on some of these alternate methods, and then basically, in terms of numbers of miles, like what that ends up looking like, to address some of the points that Alder Arnett raised in his letter. But I'm just not seeing correlation to the numbers going back to 2016. And again, I don't know if I'm looking at the right range.
He made, in his email, he just said that it's changed the last 10 years. It's been 12 years since he was chair of Public Works. So if you're looking at 2016, that might just be the end of the record there, but I could reach out to Alderman Arnett and see if he's got some actual facts that we can include in the next finance packet if you want to do that.
There's that, but I guess I would find them to be more authoritative if they came from our engineering department.
Yeah.
And around on those items, so.
If you add up line 181 to line 186 for 2025, it's about 1.5.
For 2025, 1.5 million
was-
for 2025, you're saying, Ms. Davis?
Yeah, that was 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Berg?
Again, and just in looking at that topic on addressing streets in a proactive, efficient way, I see again, we typically are using large dollar amounts for street reconstruction. But my view and what we just sort of talked about was to try to get more bang for the buck, more street done with the same dollars. And we all know that reconstruction is the most expensive way to address street repair. I think we can prioritize and give you know, the highest priority to the streets that are obviously in absolute need of reconstruction, but then beyond that, deferred to an approach which gets more streets done by a resurfacing and a remilling of streets instead as a way of addressing. So we can work with the dollars and where they're going to get allocated. I'm in favor of increasing the amount that we put into infrastructure in those different categories, but I would like to see a smaller number on reconstruction and more into the other areas of street repair.
Can I explain the process of these calculations and all? When I started, we were at about a $1.5 million range, and we've intentionally moved to a $1.75 million. But the calculations for 26, 27, 8, and 9 are not definitive because of the plans that are involved with the engineering department. So in reality, if you were to look at the actual equations behind these cells, 1.750 million is in the 181 row. And then as things are defined, it automatically subtracts out of that 1.75 million to another cell just to total the total of the 1.75 million. So it's not an indication looking, you know, down the road that we're trying to raise the reconstruction costs. It's more of a placeholder that those are the undefined dollars at this point in time, without the plan being the definition. All of it is just lumped in there so that the blue cell in its entirety is representing 1.75 million.
Yeah, that's good to clarify. Thank you, Mark, on that. Just to put closure on this point that I've tried to make, though, the milling method of resurfacing a street would be to take off by milling 2 inches and put down 3 inches. And in doing that, you would actually add life to that street for 10 or more years.
Yeah. Okay. Any further discussion? Otherwise, we can go on to the next item. There was no action to take on that, so. Okay. All right. Thank you. Move on to item G then, convene a closed session per 19.85 to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or it is likely to become involved. Indoor pool.
I'll move to go into closed session for that reason.
Motion by Berg. Second by Lampy. Okay. Berg,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
aye. Davis,
Aye.
Lampy.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. Good.
You go to more. Breakout rooms.
Oh, I gotta bring them
You
up.
can close all rooms in red. They'll be back within 50 seconds.
I'll see what Fred does. I click on Fred and get him back in here.
He'll be forced back in 30 seconds.
Okay.
35. I think you might want to close the breakout room window.
Make sure you guess somebody else can make that motion. There it is. Okay, back into open session.
Just enough
I
to
can make it.
generate.
Okay, I'll make a motion to direct city staff to write a letter to the school district administration in regards to our closed session meeting.
I would second that.
Second,
A second by Lampy. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. I will go to last review, adjournment.
And move to adjourn.
Motion by Lampy,
Second,
second by Berg. Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Oh.